I would like to thank one of my subscribers, Delina Robinson, for this video. And it covers something that's very interesting. We all know this has been a very bad flu season, and the flu deaths are rising every single day in the country. And this is a woman that gives a totally different angle to what's going on. And that's biological warfare on the public. Is it far-fetched? No, because America has a long-standing history of using germ and biological warfare, dating all the way back to the Native Americans with the smallpox. And we have seen other biological and germ warfare attacks in Africa with the Ebola and HIV. And we know about the Tuskegee experiments. So the history is there. But I'm going to go ahead and play this video so that you can listen to what this woman is saying about this is a possible biological attack on the public and not the flu. All right, let me go ahead and play this video.
Deborah Taveras with StopTheCrime.net. This is an emergency broadcast to let everyone know that is listening that this flu season that has spread through the United States is a biological warfare that has been induced upon us. So I'm going to talk to you about that now, read to you what the media is telling us, and then talk to you about the ways in which we know it's a biological warfare. Okay, so it is very important for you to understand that the Center for Disease Control is an agency whose purpose and sole purpose is to support vaccinations for big pharma. The CDC has been caught altering data on the MMR vaccine that causes autism as leaked by whistleblowers within the CDC. Please watch the YouTube Vaxxed. The article I'm going to read to you below is misleading the public because we are an agency network of corporations and we are being deceived. And this is a genocide program. So here's what the article is telling us. 2018 flu season is shaping up as one of the worst in years, officials are telling us. The entire continental United States is experiencing widespread flu right now. The first time in 13 years of the current tracking system that this has happened, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. There's no prevention about anything with the Center for Disease Control. They are a genocide agency working for Big Pharma. Officials said that the flu season is shaping up to be one of the worst in recent years. The rate of flu hospitalizations and the number of people hospitalized with the flu per 100,000 nearly doubled last week. They go on to tell us that the latest data for the week ending June 6th of 2018 suggests the season may have peaked right now, the CDC's director told reporters last Friday. But she warned that many more people will be infected before the season is over. There's a difference between an active flu season when a large number of people get sick and a severe season when numbers of people hospitalized for flu or who die from the infection is usually high. It can be hard to tell in real time where a flu season will fall in the severity scale because sometimes reports of influenza hospitalization and deaths, especially deaths among children, lag. That being said, this year is starting to look like a severe season for flu and maybe more severe than last year, which was also bad, said the head of the CDC's influenza division. There's lots of flu in lots of places. Recently, there's been an uptick in activity by another influenza, and they talk about various viruses in this article, and they talk about warning that even if the season appears to have peaked, flu viruses will circulate for weeks to come, and people should continue to take precautions against getting infected. People over the age of 65 are being hospitalized for flu this season more than any other population. They're targeting that population for genocide. Even people age 50 to 64 are being hospitalized in large numbers. Flu often hits the ends of age spectrum more than the middle, and that's the case this year as well. A grim tally may continue to rise in coming weeks of deaths. Officials feared that the flu vaccine may not work particularly well this season, but it appears to be faring slightly better than expected. Preliminary testing by the CDC suggests the vaccine is probably more protective than it was in Australia during its 2017 winter. The Australian interim estimate suggested that the vaccine was the main virus that was able to affect the H3N2 was the main virus that during their most recent winter was only about 10% effective, only 10% effective. That means if 100 people got the flu shot and all were exposed to the HN2 viruses, only 10 would have been protected. Again, only 10 out of 100 would have been protected with the vaccine. They go on to say that it looks more like the H3N2 portion of the vaccine is performing here like it did last year, when it was 34% effective at preventing infection. Unfortunately, that's about on par for the flu shot's H3N2 component, which is the weak link of flu vaccine. The CDC should have interim data on the question of vaccines effectiveness in the second half of February of 2018. Now, understand this is a fingerprintless scattering of bioweapons on the American population. Now, I have had this vetted with higher ups, and it's conclusive. This is part of the genocide program and the Rothschild and Rockefeller assault to transform the United States by all kinds of weapons systems, not only economic, but attacks with flus as well. So I wanted to read to you some of the sections out of the NASA War Plan. This will be linked under this broadcast and on stopthecrime.net, which reveals the following and is being executed by the U.S. Air Force, DARPA, the CIA, FBI, Southern Command, Atlantic Command, Australian Department of Defense, and many others are involved in the NASA War Plan. On page 51, it talks about the use of a fingerprintless scattering of bioweapons for war strategies and what they're doing here in this country. They talk about bacteriological viruses, fatal to disabling, short to long-term scales, undetectable, and binary means two-part system. So they're using undetectable binary assaults on us as well. They talk about on page 52 that airborne varieties of Ebola and Lassa, etc. This is germ warfare. They are engaged with germ warfare on the American population. Long-term fingerprintless campaign as opposed to shock and awe. These are bioweapons. Note the silent weapons system for a quiet war is fully engaged. Page 53 of the NASA war document talks about use of existing biocommatives and infection and ideal for incapacitating people, as well as this being weaponized by the U.S. and the USSR in the 50s and the 60s, easily transmitted via aerosol. So we know that the overhead spraying program and weather manipulation programs are also being used for the dispersions of viruses as well. We know that. It's highly infectious. They say that a 1 to 5 day incubation, 3-week recovery, tested on humans in Operation Whitecoat, which we're going to discuss in a moment. No treatment available. Now, I'm going to read some of the information from the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which is an operational research technical manual and a declaration of war and genocide on the global population. So on page 6 of Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, this is what it says. In 1954, this was the issue of primary concern, although the so-called moral issues were raised in view of the law of natural selection. It was agreed that a nation or world of people who will not use their intelligence are no better than an animal, so that does not have intelligence. Such people are beasts of burden and stakes on the table by choice and consent. On page 7 of the silent weapons system, it says, in interest of the future world order, peace, and tranquility, it was decided to privately wage a quiet war against the American public with an ultimate objective of permanently shifting the natural and social energy or the wealth of the undisciplined and irresponsible many into the hands of the self-disciplined, responsible, worthy few. In order to implement this objective, it was necessary to create, secure, and apply new weapons, which, as it turned out, was a class of weapons so subtle and sophisticated in their principle of operation and public appearance as to earn for themselves the name of silent weapons. The public cannot comprehend this weapon and therefore cannot believe that they are being attacked and subdued by a weapon. We are all being attacked and subdued by these weapons. The public might instinctively feel that something is wrong, but that is because of the technical nature of the silent weapon. They cannot express their feelings in a rational way or handle the problem with intelligence. Therefore, they do not know how to cry for help and do not know how to associate with others to defend themselves against this weapon. When a silent weapon is applied gradually, the public adjusts and adapts to its presence and learns to tolerate its encroachment on their lives until the pressure, psychological and economic, become too great and they crack up. Therefore, the silent weapons system is a type of biological warfare. It attacks the vitality, options, and mobility of the individuals of a society by knowing, understanding, manipulating, and attacking their sources of natural and social energy and their physical, mental, and emotional strengths and weaknesses. Now, the NASA War Plan discussed Operation White Coat, and I'm going to go over that a bit here in this horrific announcement that I'm making. And I will discuss this further on upcoming radio shows. But this is a consent statement of some of the military that participated in Operation White Coat. And this is actually their consent statement as given to them that they had to sign. And this one was signed back in June 29th of 1955. It says it's confidential. This will be under the links of this broadcast. A program of investigation sponsored by the United States Army aimed towards determining the amount of a disease agent necessary to produce illness in men has been explained to me. Again, this is a consent that one of these participants had to sign. They go on to say that they understand that the only way in which this essential information can be obtained is by the exposure of volunteers to known amounts of the agent. I understand that such volunteers may become ill and that the program is not without hazard. I further understand that the agent to be studied is a virus which is the cause of Q fever. I understand that the organisms causing the disease will be suspended in air. I'm reading that again. And that by breathing this air, I will expose myself to infection with this disease agent by breathing the air. This is an aerosol dispersion that the United States has been under. I understand that within 3 to 21 days after the exposure, I may become ill, and that the expected symptoms are fever, headache, and general aching. I understand that the course of the disease may be from 1 to 3 weeks. I understand the decision as to appropriate treatment will be made by the attending physicians. I understand that such treatments, if employed, may have to be given in 2 or more phases. I further understand that I will be restricted to a single area for the period of this study, probably 4 to 6 weeks. I understand that various diagnostic procedures will be required. There has been no exercise of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other forms of constraint or coercion in order to obtain this consent from me. Of my own free will, and after consideration for a period of more than 4 weeks, I affix my signature herein, indicating my willingness as a soldier to serve voluntarily as a subject for these studies, with the understanding that I will not be required to participate in studies which, in themselves, are contrary to my religious beliefs. Operation White Coat goes on to say that the Seventh-day Adventist Church's relationship to the government military activity had been supportive by non-combative means. And in 1936, the Seventh-day Adventist Church established a medical cadet corps training program. This allowed Adventists to remain non-combatant, but positive towards the war effort. So it's very important to understand what I just read to you about the form that they were told to sign by the U.S. government, where it says it was not coercion. It was most absolutely coercion. They did not want to serve on the battlefield. So this was an option for them to sign and agree to experimentation so that these experiments could be experimented now and used on us at a later date. So I want to continue to tell you more about Operation White Coat. You can look at some of this for yourself, but it goes on to say the history of Operation White Coat and the history. Over the course of the 19-year program, more than 2,300 U.S. Army soldiers, many of whom were trained medics, while some volunteered immediately after the basic training for conscientious objections at Fort Houston, Texas, therefore before they began their medic training. The near certainty of being assigned as a combat medic in Vietnam helped some of those instead choose to remain in the United States with the White Coat program. This was coercion. And they contributed in the White Coat experiments by allowing themselves to be infected with bacteria that were considered likely choices for biological attack. They were used as guinea pigs so that we could all be attacked now. The goal was to determine dose response for these agents. The volunteers were then treated with antibiotics to cure the infection. Some volunteers underwent a variety of investigational vaccines for Q fever. And they go on to say that many of these men were never treated at all and were and suffered tremendous damage. The participants were required to sign a consent form after discussing the risks and treatments with a medical officer, the one I read to you, of the soldiers who were approached. After providing 20% of the people declined to be involved in this program. They go on to say that the White Coat operation contributed to vaccines approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and that it allowed more vaccines to be made and used on all of us. The Operation White Coat came to an end in 1973 when the draft for the U.S. military ended, and thus no more conscientious objectors were to be conscripted. The United States Accountability Office issued a report in September of 1994, which stated that between 1940 and 1973, the United States Department of Defense and other national security agencies studied hundreds and thousands of human subjects in tests and experiments involving hazardous substances. Now, I want to just back up and say to you, all of you that are watching, my husband and I went to Washington, D.C. to the records department and got this record out of the records department. What this was what initiated our desire to see this for ourselves from the records department in Washington, D.C. And we went there in 2011. So we received this from the records department. Essentially, we were following up what we understood to be the Congress's agreement to allow the Department of Defense to use chemicals and biologicals on the American citizens without our knowledge or consent. So when we found this document, indeed vetted it for ourselves in Washington, D.C., we realized that much of the spraying that people had endured in Southern California with malathion was all part of the extermination plan. So they go on to talk about unethical human experimentation in the United States. And you can look at all of this for yourselves. I am going to curtail this broadcast now. I will be talking about this on further radio shows, but please be advised that the United States is under a bioweapon chemical attack right now. So everyone, please go to stopthecrime.net, subscribe. We're going to be releasing many, many concerns that we all must know about and figure out how we sustain ourselves during these horrific attacks.
All right. I'm going to end it right there. Ladies and gentlemen, please tell me what you think. Leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell and also join me over on Black Junction TV and blackspot.com. Peace.